Hey guys, this is David. Today's quick thought actually came out of a meeting that I was having with a colleague recently. Issue had came up, and toward the end of the issue, somebody was all excited about, well, all right, how are we going to document that? It was like, okay, and it sort of got me to thinking after the meeting. And a lot of times, if you think about our organizations, they exist on a scale. On one side, you basically have the organizations that sort of operate in this cowboyism or heroics mode, and on the other side of the scale you have organizations who operate on more of a patterns, processes, procedures, standards type activity. And when you think about it that way, a lot of organizations, when they're newer, they're more of the cowboy heroics type model, where one person or a small subset of people are doing a lot of different things and solving a lot of different problems. That might be more your heroics model, where as organizations get more stable and more established, they're trying to be more repeatable. They're trying to basically set it up to where they can do things over and over again and largely get the same results. And that may be more of the patterns and practices or standards and process type model. It was interesting because if you think about it, a lot of organizations, they're somewhere in the middle. Most of us are. And it can be a lot of times a situation where your organization may be moving from one to the other as they're growing from being a smaller company to more of a larger company. Or it may be a situation where you actually have the cowboy heroics type model in some groups in your organization and more of the patterns and practices in others. Or even product lines where it's divided that way. Now, interestingly enough, it got me to thinking about it with the whole topic. When my colleague, we were in the meeting, and the colleague, you've heard the first question, the colleague asked the question, well, how are we going to document, did somebody document this? Or the other one, a lot of times you'll hear it in the meeting is that the question's asked is, we need a process for that. And that's more when you're dealing in the cowboy mode, and people are trying to say, well, how are we going to repeat this the next time? How are we going to avoid this problem in the next time? The biggest thing to remember if you're operating in a more of a cowboyish or a heroics type model, the reality is probably nobody is. I mean, that was actually the case in that meeting. That was when the awkward silence came up. When who's documenting this? Well, nobody is. We're addressing the problem. Now, interestingly enough, in a cowboy-type model, the one thing that become a challenge to that is you are beholden to their heroic skills. You are beholden to the cowboy. And what you find when you're in that type of organization is the challenge becomes being beholden to the cowboy skills. You can't recreate them. You a lot of times have to solve the same problem over and over again because you're dependent on the cowboy and his heroics. And the problem that a lot of companies come into is they start to realize that, okay, I can't just give a guy a bedroll and a gun and make him a cowboy. There's a reason the Cowboys are the Cowboys. They're good at it. They actually have that skill set. And as you get more of the patterns and processes type model, a lot of times you have more of a factory type model or a factory worker type model. And that's where people are doing stuff that's repeatable. It's the same thing over and over again. We know what to do. We've seen it before. We've written it down. We know what the process is. The one challenge to the patterns and practices model is a lot of times you'll be sitting in a meeting and you'll hear the opposite situation of the statement of, well, it just never seems like we get anything done. We just can't get anything done without 6 meetings and 12 people in the meeting. And to some extent, if you're more of a patterns and practices type model, you're probably going to hear that occasionally. Because the strength of the patterns and practices model is it is repeatable. If you actually build your patterns and your practices and create the structure and the governance around all your documentation and whatnot, it does make things repeatable. And people are, to some extent, interchangeable. But now the challenge to that is there is an investment to that. There is an investment cost in that librarian type model. Is this somebody who's actually coordinating and collating all these documents and processes that you're creating? And it makes things actually get a little bit slower. You just basically have to accept what it is. Now, as you look at your organization and you try to decide kind of what you're going to be or what kind of organization you want, the biggest thing that we all want to do is actually consider what it is that we're rewarding. What is it we're asking for? Because if we say we want to be a patterns and processes type by organization, and yet we keep asking the Cowboys to come in with their guns and save the day, we're not being congruent. We're not being honest with ourselves. Or if largely, we are patterns and practices organization, and we keep griping at people because they can't solve things on their own, or they're not empowered to do what they're supposed to do. Well, a lot of times we've created that. So we need to look at it from both sides and make sure that we're building in what we want, the end state, know what it is that we want for the end state, and basically rewarding that when it gets performed. The thing to always consider is, again, you don't just hand a factory worker a bedroll and a gun and make him a cowboy. The good part to the Cowboys is they can kill a lot of wolves. They're really good at it. The challenge you have to give up on the Cowboys is sometimes they're going to kill a few of the cows. And that's just a reality for the way it works. But on the flip side, from the factory workers' perspective, they walk into a set building every day and do the same thing every day over and over again based on whatever the process is. They're not going to be the ones that step up when the wolf shows up in the building. You're going to need a security guard for that because that's the process. Listen, guys, this is David. Hope this was fun to you. We'll do another one at some point in time, but this is another one of the original thoughts. And just remember, the takeaway from today is just think about what your end state is and make sure that's what you're asking for, and definitely that's what you're rewarding. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.